Hi, welcome to the inaugural Conservation Commission virtual meeting format. So I think we've all done that in subcommittees, but there's a couple of things different in a regular forum. And so I've been asked to read this at the start of the meeting, which are kind of the rules of the road. So bear with me while I go through this. This meeting of the Conservation Commission will take place in a webinar format through Zoom. The chair of the commission is Larry Dunn. The host of the webinar is Ruth Lofgren of the planning staff. Anyone speaking should state their names prior to speaking each time. We're going to have to remember to do that. The panelists in this webinar meeting will be the commission members and the planning staff. We promoted everyone to panelists because we somehow lost the chat and raise hand thing. So we're going to sort that out as a follow-on question. So everyone is there and have been muted by Bruce. Panelists who would like to comment on an item or share a screen item should indicate by raising your hand. It's at the bottom of the participant screen. If you've got that open, I think right now we've got, whoops. We got Bruce sharing his desktop.
No, that's not me. I'm not sure who is sharing their desktop.
You're viewing Rick Smith's screen.
Oh,
Cool.
okay.
All right, not anymore. So,
Okay.
This is Liz. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Liz.
All right. So let me continue. So raise your hand. You'll be able to comment one at a time.
Oh, there we are.
And it should be, as I said, you hit the panelist at the bottom and you'll see raised hand on the right side. Panelists should mute their microphones until called upon. Okay, I guess that means everyone should mute their lines except me. And then we'll go around and we'll unmute and unmute as we go through that. To make a motion or second a motion, commission members can raise a hand to be acknowledged by the host or chair. To vote on a motion, the commission members will be called upon individually by the chair to vote. The public can participate in the meeting during the public communications agenda item, which we do have coming up. The public will be asked to raise their hand during the public communications if they want to speak at this time by using the icon to raise hand at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. The public will be called upon by the host one at a time and will be able to speak during this time. Attendees must identify themselves before speaking. Attendees can also submit any comments in the chat function. I should point out that we can't find the chat function, so something in the setup for this town edition will have to be looked at for a later, for the next meeting. We have used it in our subcommittee meeting. And I have another item is I did have a couple questions on, gee, my screen is too small. So I thought I would show up that this is a dongle. So you put that into your computer and you get an HDMI coming out the end. You take the HDMI cord, you put it in that, you hook it up to your TV, and you get your 50-inch. You can see Christine, 50 inches big. She may not want that, but so you can make things a lot bigger if you want. All right, so that was the introduction. What I like to, so Bruce, I think I was going to go to the agenda with a share the screen one. Let me go find it.
Sure. And would you like me to take the roll call?
Well, yeah, that's the first thing on the agenda. Hold on. Let me bring that up. And you should be seeing the agenda, and actually it was the handout. It's in the PDF format. So you should see that, and on the right side you should see all the people with video, which is interesting. I don't see it. Can you see the raise your hand function, Bruce?
I can't, but I'm the host, so I wouldn't have that option.
No. I meant, can you see it? Because in the screen share mode, I got the people on the right.
I'll answer that, Larry. No, we cannot see the raise hand function with you sharing the screen.
Oh,
Let me see if there's another way, though.
If you hit oh, hi, this is Ann. If you hit the participants, though, it comes up.
Yes, yes. This is Michelle. It's Patrick and Matt. See what you mean. That just takes up the screen, though, so you have to kind of go back and forth between the two.
oh, I see. Okay, yep, I see it. All right. It's over on, yeah, it's a separate block up on the side. Okay. Let us go. Boy, this is a little longer to get started. We do better next time. All right, so Bruce, let's do roll call.
Yeah, for the roll call, Michelle Fitzpatrick, just say if you're here or not.
Here,
Okay. Kristen DeStante. Kristen might be muted. She's here. She's here.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, now I'm unmuted and here.
Okay, good. Ann Schmidt.
I'm here.
Okay. Larry Dunn.
Here.
Bray Rafferty.
Here.
And Tom Olson.
Here.
All right, next item is the approval of minutes. And since this is still sharing, I will scroll down. And this should be from March 2nd. So that, Bruce, that is visible.
Right now, you'd have to, yeah, I can see the top of it. Yep.
Okay. So no, I'd have to scroll down.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, are there any comments on the minutes? And raise your hand if you have any comments. Tom has his hand raised.
Yeah, and my recommendation is that we accept the minutes as, I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All right, now let's do a vote. And I think we need to go through each of the members and ask for a voice vote. So.
Could we just do like a thumbs up, thumb down? And then
Well-
Bruce could do a quick count?
Well, you could either do a verbal vote here, or you could each raise your hand, and then either myself or Larry would say, it looks like there's a unanimous vote here. Everyone's
Okay.
saying aye.
Approve.
All
Approve.
right,
Ann?
let's see Michelle's hand up.
Yep.
Ray,
Was-
Okay, that looks like 6 to me.
Mhm.
All right, so 6 ayes, so the motion passes unanimously.
this is Michelle. Can I have a clarification? When you say raise your hand, you mean the physical hand or the hand on the computer?
the hand on the,
I meant the hand on the computer.
That's what I thought.
I don't have one.
Did you go open the participants panel?
Me?
Who said they didn't have one?
Distante.
Yeah, if you open the participants, it's in the bottom,
Oh, okay, I see it, okay.
open the box.
it'll say
Got it.
participants 13. Click that and it should pop up.
Got it, yep, I got it.
Okay. All right.
But could I just make a point of, oops, shoot. Just a point of information that I don't think we all have to be muted, because whoever's talking, it automatically mutes everybody else. So as long as you're not going to be making a lot of noise when you're not talking, you don't have to be muting yourself off and on. Just saying.
Well, that's panelists only. So,
Okay.
all right. All right. So the next item is public communications. So we do have the public there. I would ask that they raise their hand to be acknowledged if they want to ask a question or provide input to us. I do not see anybody raising their hand. So,
Now can you hear me?
oh.
I'm
Well, Liz,
sorry.
yeah, you got to hit the raise the hand button so we
Yeah,
can.
well,
can-
it's Shift Command something else, it said to me. Okay. Yeah, there are three things I would like to just mention quickly. When you discuss the plan, the outdoor space plan of I would like to know to what extent you have considered Groton Conservation Advocates' recommendations, or if not now, will you in the future? The next item is, I see the No Ink School is on your agenda. I don't know what your discussion will be, but I would like to recommend that the Conservation Commission recommend to the town council that the town of Groton gives the No Ink School to the village of No Ink, to the executive committee of No Ink. This is very common when towns want to offload a property, they give it to the next lower level governmental structure. And the third thing is an item that is not on your agenda, which is, are you going to make any recommendation to the town council about what they do about the plastics ordinance? I do note that a few towns in the state have suspended their ordinances, and GCA would recommend that you recommend to the town council that if they feel the need to suspend the ordinance, they do it for not just, in general, but make a very specific time, preferably 3 months. That's it for me.
Okay, and Liz, could you just please state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Liz Raisbeck.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Liz. What we are going to address each of those three items as we go through the agenda. So we'll kind of let that play out as we get into each of those three areas. Is there any other public comment?
Yes. I have to raise my hand, I guess.
Oh, that sound is bad.
Really?
It was, it's better now.
Raise hand, there we go. So I guess my question is, or do I need to be recognized by the floor?
And announce your name, please.
Eugenia Villagra. And I just wanted to know if we can occasionally jump in the way that one jumps in through Zoom, according to your, the rules that you've set up for this during the process of the discussion on.
Well, the way we're going to work this is the time for public comment. You can rate what our intention was, that you would raise your hand and provide a chat, which was the topic or comment, and then we would then it would be my choice to recognize you, to invite you in. So we're not going to do this open for everyone, because that's not, we don't do that in the normal session either. Since we don't have chat today, what I would suggest is you could raise your hand, and then we'll make a decision at a time, and it may just be what's a quick comment, but not to get involved into discussion per se. So we're going to have to play that one a little by ear, since we don't have a chat function that seems to be operating in this version. All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So if there's no other public communication, the next item is conservation plan update, and there's really, and let me go back to, there we go. So on the conservation plan update is we've got really 3 separate sections to do. Plus there was a homework assignment, as you recall. But first, before we get into the subcommittees, I would like to share with you a new share. Let's see how this works. And there should be, it's up to, so I think it was that one. Yeah, or it was this one. I think that's it. Okay. I did get an email from Joan Smith, who's the president of GOSA. So I think you can see it. So not knowing how big your screen is, but I'll read it. The Groton Conservation Commission has come up with an absolutely stunning draft open space plan. This is the best I have seen in my many years of poring over plans, maps, historical, economic, LID, diversity database, climate change, and background information. I will use it as a resource for future use in documents, grant applications, and appeals. I wanted to pass that along to you guys.
Nice.
You know, it's nice to get some feedback, and we've got a long way to go yet. But I think I've said in a couple of sessions, it actually is looking pretty professional, right? And we'll go over some of it today. So I did send a thank you back to her, and that's sharing it with you guys. All right, so let's get into the work. I thought the way we do this is have each of the subcommittees provide a status on where they're at. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. There we go. And from the, I think I'll do the data one first because we have some homework assignments on the text one. Michelle, would you like to give a quick summary of where we are at?
Sure. So we've met a couple times, and we have two. This is Michelle Fitzpatrick speaking. We would have what I would consider 2 deliverables that the rest of the committee haven't seen yet. One of them is, and I actually have the spreadsheet. Can I share my screen and put the spreadsheet up, Larry?
You can, or I've got it prepped to go either way.
All right, so why don't you go ahead? I don't care which one you start with. We have 2 different spreadsheets. We have the one that we were using during our discussions, and then we have the one that I created and sent to you guys.
All right, I think that was it. Let's see if that, oh, wrong one. That's not right. Let me, I gotta find a little tiny one in the, oh, there it is. All right, that's one of them.
Okay, so this is the one that I put together, and I sent this to Bruce so he can send it to the members that aren't on our subcommittee. So basically, I took the open space layers that we got from Jenna, and so this was all those that we talked about, and Tom had talked to her about how the town called this open space. So basically, there were layers for the town with recreational facilities, town without recreational facilities, the state open space, the city open space, and private. So basically, this document on the page that's list has all those different layers with who it belongs to, the PIN number, actually the layer it's from, the PIN number, who owns it, what the address is, and how many acres. And there's some other data. The different layers had different data, but those are the basic data, and then park type for the town with recreational facilities. So this is a starting point of our inventory of open space for the town. We need to cross-reference this with the lists of properties that are in the open space plan, because those are just listed with the names and number of acres. So we need to make sure that we have to line those up with these, and if there's any on that list that aren't in here, we need to add them. We also need to add any other open space that the town doesn't consider open space. So that list is the beginning point of our inventory, but we obviously need to massage it with the other information.
So that's this one.
And so this is the other thing we did, was the text committee had taken the first cut at making a comment on the properties that the committee had together. We picked a bunch of properties. Larry put them through the model. This spreadsheet had the top priorities, and then the text subcommittee put their opinion of them, and then the data subcommittee went through, and the last two columns are, should we pay attention to it or should we look at it? And then the second column is the description that says why we should pay attention to it, or the fact that we need to investigate it. And then those, so there's a bunch of what we call buckets. And so the idea would be we're still considering how to take this information and put it into the plan, to maybe say that we look through this, there's these buckets. And so we're still sort of thinking about how to put that in there. But the one piece of this was, we thought we might want to do was for the tech subcommittee to maybe tell us what they were thinking when they put their comments in there, and then we can share what we were thinking when we put our comments in there.
All right, so the two work products, is one of which is a requirement for the Conservation Commission, is to provide the inventory. So that's
right,
primarily the last one, but we do need to make sure and scrub that a couple of different ways. And to an earlier comment, we do include the city, right? And we'll get to that actually.
Yeah, well, one of the tabs was the city, but there's only like one piece, and it doesn't make any sense. So it's city owned, but the town owned properties are in the city. So like things that are inside the city boundaries are considered on the town list.
Yeah, so it's being considered. So
yes,
one of the things is we had a long debate about the definition and the inventory. There's a couple of different inventories, and we got to go back to the text team, I guess, and talk about how we want to show the inventory, because it's our definition, which is permanent. It's the town's definition, which is anything that's green, almost. There's a state definition, and so we went through all those different definitions. So we've got to have a discussion and a question once we get the list scrubs of all the different properties and have them identified, that Michelle said, on how we want to represent it in the final document. So let's hold off on that for now, but this is the status of where we're at. So is there any question from the other participants, I guess the text team, on what's next from your point of view?
Tom has his hand up, Larry.
Okay. Oh, I don't have the participant. Oh, there he is. All right, Tom.
Okay, well, as I got asked about, as far as what did the text team put into the second spreadsheet, it wasn't I got sent the spreadsheet, and what I did with it, I really didn't, it wasn't a team effort, it was a Tom Olson effort, where I went through the listing, because I saw that this listing looked like for what we had developed as a Conservation Commission, when we had all the when we divided and had the quadrangles, and we went through and kind of said these look like good areas, and so I thought that was the list of the parcels. And then what I tried to do was to take a look at those individual parcels, and I added columns on here to your spreadsheet in regard to, do we see this as an easement area right now? Is it does it meet up with the area of climate change and of our priority listing relative to, is it a green belt? Is it climate change? Is it recreational, that spectrum of open space desirability that we have. I tried to add that knowledge into your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So that's really, it wasn't, but it was just a Tom Olson effort rather than as additional data as far as into your spreadsheet. It wasn't discussed by the team as a whole.
All right.
So point that out.
All right. So Larry's speaking again. So what I showed you was the sort, from that long list. I'll go back to the S because it's a little easier to look at. So what we decided to do is go through all that data you sent us with all those comments. And we did recognize it was from the quadrant review we did, plus from the 2013 listing. I think, that was sent out on a prior memo. Smashed it all together, took your comments. We went through it all. This is the subset here. And if I look through here, there's, let's see, what do we have here? I was trying to just do the quick count. There's 36 that we said we do some action on. Now, we're not finished yet because 36 is still a lot of properties, but we are going to go through, we'll knock off some, based upon the information provided. So we're still working through it, but I think we're starting to zero in on it. So this is kind of the net list. And so I think what you said is I think we're in sync, Tom, because that was my understanding of what you did do. All right. Any other comments? All right, so we at our next subcommittee meeting, we will take this up and continue to refine it. Let's move on to the text team subcommittee.
Tom
Okay.
can report.
As far as I had, as before, when we had our last meeting back in March, you had asked us to kind of put questions together, so to focus in on our discussion at this portion of the council meeting. And those questions are, I guess it's way back at the end of the agenda package. It's the last item, the 4 questions that I was going to target for this meeting. And so what I can do on those is to bring up the Word document and take a look at that as far as what to go to those pages. So the first question is in regard to page 16 through 26 on the open space management plan inventory. And I'm going to go ahead and share my document to get us to those pages. So I have those up. Now, hopefully everybody had a chance to get to the document before the meeting here. Let's see, here's 12, 13, 14, 15.
Yes, page 16 to 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is basically the open space inventory. This is kind of what you already started talking about, is that we have Jenna's map. This is the map that Michelle just talked about, that she has, the spreadsheet now with all this information on it. And so the real question that comes up to is, do we want to add anything to this map or take anything from this map in our relative to the fact that we now have larger number of definitions as far as, and the reason Jenna put this map together is that it's not just her doing it on her own. She's been directed through Parks and Rec and stuff to identify areas that are open to the public, okay, so that they can go in and use them. And so this brings in things like individual parks, GOSA properties, the state parks, as well as a lot of the schools, because they have playgrounds and stuff on them. So that's why this is what comprises Jenna's list, as well as just other. It has nothing to do with open space protection. So that's really the question: is do we want to take a look at from a protection perspective or from a public access perspective in regard to identification of, or come up with our own map and ask either Jenna to develop that for the Town Conservation Commission map of open space, and leave this map as the Town of Groton public access open space map.
All right, Bray has his hand raised. So the chair recognizes Bray.
Ray speaking to Tom. On the map, it does not have the Gunjiwan property.
It does not. That's a true statement. That's what comes because that's not technically been opened by the state, just like it doesn't have this, the Candlewood Hill State Management Wildlife Management Area either.
Yeah, so I'll raise my hand. I think what we had talked about was that our basic starting point for the map would be those properties that are permanent open space, regardless whether it's city, town, state, or private, right? That's like the baseline. Then we're going to provide other layers, right? And Michelle was talking about doing that, providing other layers that then add in to the extent that we identify it, things like, and oh, by the way, has nothing to do with whether it's accessed or not, because animals, plants, bees, people, you know, that open space is open space. Then we're going to add to it other layers that add in some of these other things. In other words, do we add in schools? You know, and part of it was, that's not really open space, you know, per se. So we weren't going to do some of those things. So I think from a text team point of view, you know, start with that basic layer, and then how do you, looking for recommendations on how do you think we should add those additional layers for the additional categories, you know, because farmlands, you know, the 495, 409, 490, I keep using the spray bottle. The 490s, you know, that's a different layer, right? Because it's not permanently protected, it's quasi, right? Or easements, you know, we don't really have easements on here. So part of what we need is, how would you like to show it so that there's a narrative as we go through the document, right? Obviously, there's going to be a separate overlay on when we're filling in the proposed areas in general, because we don't want to be specific on the parcels, for filling in the beltways and some other things for the recommendations on where we want to go forward.
Conservation Commission.
So Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, so my feeling is, this is Michelle Fitzpatrick speaking. My feeling is that we should include everything that we call open space, the town calls open space. We could add another column on the spreadsheet that has a designation. We could say it's protected, not protected, you know, whatever categorization we want to include in that. But the inventory itself should include every piece of property that we think has any connection at all to open space. We just add that information on what type of open space it is.
And Larry again, I believe that's what we said. We'd start with the baseline of the word best case definition, and then add to it so that at the end we have everything, you know, that, you know, we're back up to either the town definition or the maximum definition on quote open space. But we just need the sequence of that. I think the inventory on a spreadsheet kind of a view or matrix point of view, you know, we could do a little differently and calculate the amount of acreage, et cetera, that we need to do anyway. So does that match what you just said, Michelle?
Yes and no. It's Michelle again. I think we're approaching this from two different angles, and you know, basically what I would like to see is for everybody to look at that spreadsheet and tell us, well, first of all, we can compare it to what's in the plan. Tell us what's missing on there, and we can start designating. I mean, one of the layers is farm and forest. So I'm guessing most of that is already the 490 property. So we can start, you know, we can agree on what the list is, you know, what the categories are, and then start designating which of those places we think is protected, not protected, questionable. So what are those categories, I guess, that we want to include in terms of what, quote unquote, kind of open space it is? And then we can agree on what the different varieties are, and then we can start designating in the spreadsheet what parcels fall into what definition. That's my suggestion. And we need to also get people's input into what parcels need to be added.
All right, any comments on that?
It's just as far as, because I'm kind of in charge of this part here, is I think from the text perspective, one of the things that we're lacking is the definition of protected. If you want to start from your layers being in protected, we do not have a good definition of protected in the current text, from my viewpoint. Because we've been working with definitions in regard to the zoning, coming out of POCD, but we haven't really gone into protected, and from an aspect of, like, a good example here is like when you use the Oswald dollars, there's an easement that has a public access and recreation easement that's attached to the property deed that then makes that a protected parcel. Okay, we saw that on Boulder Heights and the Kalinowski School. Those are the last ones that were generated for the town, and I have hard copies of those. Obviously, there was a lot of knowledge about that because that was, you get the Attorney General involved in the whole 9 yards. So if that is the gold standard we're using, we would then have to then go back and physically check, do I have that level of documentation for every one of the properties that are going to make up your initial baseline list of open spaces? So as I'm looking at what's being shared here on these open spaces, obviously state property is state property, and I doubt if we're going to have access to the deeds on that. But the stuff that, Pequot Woods, for example, it was procured a number of years ago. And has anybody really gone back and taken a look at the deed and make sure that there's protection? Because I don't know how that was paid for. Was it just granted the town, or was there an Oswald grant? I know that for everything that GOSA has been given, it was all done with Oswald grants, which then requires you to have that easement attached to it. So some of these things are no-brainers. Really, all the areas, that are GOSA, but you start getting in some of these other town areas. Obviously, from the 1988 bonding issue, that was all Oswald granted. We have a majority of stuff, but on this map, there's a lot of purple here that I don't think, in having to, who's going to go do the real working with the assessor's office? Is that a task that we really want to be going? And should we just be saying, I want to know whether this is protected, give a list to the assessor's office, let them do the research?
Yeah, I think, Larry, again, I think you hit on it, Tom. I think we start with, we believe these are permanent. I mean, permanent, legally protected. I mean, that's kind of the baseline definition. And identify those parcels which we believe fit that category. Those which we can validate right now, we could say validated. Those that aren't, you're right, we would have to ask as an action item for the town to do that until the town opens up. I mean, the records, because you got to go down there to look at them. We're not gonna be able to do it anyway, right, for a while. So I think if we do it with a validated, to be validated, or whatever words the text team wants to come up with, I think that'd be the way to do the baseline, but it is formally legally protected. And like I said, after that, then there's other, things that are maybe quasi-protected, or at least for a time period protected, that we would add on top of it.
Well, I'll take an action from here to get this formal legal protection put into the next draft, okay? So that I'll do my best as far as to have something relative to what the town records are able to do for us with that, is so we make sure our definition is actually we can give a couple examples, and I think I don't think it's gonna be that hard, but I'll take an action to do that, and then that will answer the question. And then in regard to item number 1 here.
All right, good.
Okay. For item number 2, which was on page 21, let's see, let me go forward up here to page 21. This was the, it was a 21 to 25. The text team has added new sections in regard to native plants and climate change. Does this entire committee agree with the statements and assumptions provided in sections 2.2, 2.4 to 2.6? So we were looking for, this discussion was not in prior issues of the document. The text team feels that these are very legitimate areas to be discussed in an open space plan, because it goes back to as far as on why we have open space and the type of stuff that goes on in an open space. So we did the native plants and the fauna and flora, because there's actual drivers for that, those definitions. We also put in a thing in regard to the University of New Hampshire extensions, their landscape cooperative, in regard to how they come up with the index for the different landscapes. And then we also, because they actually had Groton mapped out, and it kind of gets you, it matches up to where you see the big green arrow space in here of Bluff Point, the Gunjewamp area, the Candlewood Hill and Candlewood Ridge area up in here, your big dark green areas. And everything in white is totally urbanized, and stuff in the red and orange are the other areas of the town that basically you're transitioning from an urban to a rural areas. Okay, so that's when we put all that in there, because there was applicability to the plan, and so we felt that it was important to include this discussion as far as on how we've developed to where we are today, and what areas that we're trying to continue to improve, to protect as much green as we can in here. The intelligible sustainable development was originally drafted by Larry, was part of the original plans. We've kind of just not much done with it, but have put some references into it to get better explanations to that. One thing I just want to point out to everybody is that on the Word version, I don't know if it's working, but we have gone through and put all the references, because there's 41 references in here. They're all hyperlinked, available so it takes a little bit we start putting more references in here, but we do have everything put in now, so that we can get that out of the text. And that was one thing we did in here. And then we also went in 2.6 and added the climate change and its impact, because we've been talking about this for a lot of issues, but we basically gave them kind of a quick overview. We talked about putting input to the Yukon Circa in their visualization tool. We put that into an appendix in the back. For Appendix A, for some 100-year and 100-year floods, and then with the 20 inches of sea level rise, what the impacts and what areas are going to be seen there, so that we at least had the discussion in regard to what areas that we should be looking for relative to climate change, recognizing that we have an input into it, but there's also other things happening within the town as far as relative to the sustainability and resilience task force that's also doing things. So I just wanted to make sure that people are aware of these issues. If anybody had comments on this, or we're willing to take those, but we just kind of wanted to make sure we got that this was something that was generated by the text team. Ann did one, Kristen did the other, and I kind of put a lot of the references together for it. So. But we just wanted to make sure that everybody was on board with this philosophical portion of the plan.
All right, Michelle has her hand raised for comments.
Yep, this is Michelle Fitzpatrick. I think this is awesome, Guy. I mean, this is phenomenal, actually. The one question I did have, I didn't notice, is there a legend for that map? Because the map's great. The one that's up in the native plant section.
The best I got was just in the wording here. I talked a little bit about the reds and oranges and stuff and the greens, but we don't, I haven't been able to find, it's a scale of 0 to 1. And it's with, with green being a full 1 and nothing being a 0. So it accelerates itself. So it's not, it was just talked a little bit about in here in regard to the index is scaled 0 to 1 by
Right.
this yada, yada, yada. And that's relative to the temperatures. It's kind of a temperature map from white to red and fragmented areas and stuff. So that's the best I could do about it.
Yeah, I might be able to, I mean, it'd be nice to have, even if you just have that information on the map itself,
Okay.
but there might be a way to play with that to make it, the map have more information like that. So I'll try to take a look at it. And that map itself came from that reference
Yes,
10.
it did. Yeah, because
Okay.
the reference, you just zoom in and then I take a snippet from
Okay.
the Groton area because it's the whole Northeast.
Right. All right. Yeah, I think the map needs to have a little bit more information on the map, but I'll see.
Just a simple, sorry, it's Kristen. I don't know how to raise my hand or anything, but I'm guessing just a little sliding scale, just a simple bar across the bottom showing 0 to 1.
Exactly.
Somebody
Yeah.
whoever published this has to have it somewhere that we could just pop it underneath and then it would be.
Got it.
Well, as the
self-explanatory.
map person, I'm willing to play with that.
All right.
Whoever published it must have it somewhere.
You would think so. Yeah. Yeah, you would think so.
All right, so my comments back, Tom, is there's really 3 different sections. So I'll do the easiest one first. I appreciate you doing the references. That always bugged the heck out of me when I did the first draft of it. So that's great. I think on the second aspect, 2.4, is I support it. There's another similarly. How do we tie it in? You've got a national diversity area comments and parcels that you identified. Is there a cross reference between that map and the national diversity areas?
The national diversity is a separate task, and it's done by a different group. This North Atlantic Landscape Cooperative is only for the Northeast. So there's really no linkage between those 2 different actions. That's how I kind of separated them into 2 different chapters. The 2.4 talks in regard to where we're going with big picture stuff. And then the diversity stuff was focused by this is down in a 3-point whatever. And that's how come that it's in a separate location. They're not intended to play off each other.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the relationship between things to protect, as we recommend things to protect, how that related to this map. That's I was just kind of.
I wish there was an easier way to make it 1 for 1, but what the ecological integrity is taking a look at is more of looking at landscapes, whereas the national diversity is actually taking a look at specifics for the state of Connecticut. That's developed by the state as far as on what areas that they want to be protecting with their money.
Can I comment? Also, if you go back up to that oral school area, I think we have a lot of north-south green belts, but I think where we can find east-west connectors, I think that's valuable. And, I may be alone in that, but I feel like there's a few places up here, again, north of 95, north of where we amended, just north of where we amended it before, you could find an easy east-west connector. Go a little east. A little north.
A little north.
A little more north. There you go. Like that area across there, that already looks like a greenbelt connector. Like, wow, it's an east-west connection, And where bottlenecks down this other place. Well, maybe this is something we should do when we're in the same room if we ever are. You know, then you've got some north-south flow, but you've also got some east-west connectors, which I think is good.
Can I make a couple of comments?
No. Yes.
Bray's hand, I don't know who's at first, but Bray, go ahead.
It's a great map and everybody's made great forward progress on it. Just a couple of quick thoughts. One is I don't necessarily agree with Tom about the railroad tracks as necessarily a green break. I can see a lot of animals crossing on that and getting run over by Amtrak heading to Boston. I think, so I don't think that's to me, that wouldn't be a very strong one. The other comment is there is a Parks and Rec trail bike report that came out 2004, 2006, something like that, by the Park and Rec Department. And it was sort of a master plan for particularly getting people on bicycles to be able to go across town, either north or south, east and west. One of the observations made in that report is that we have a lot of our roads are north and south. Just as Kristen was talking about on a lot of our green brake systems, and that's sort of the way the geography, topography of the town is oriented. And the big challenge was to go east and west. How do you go from one place to another where you've actually got shoulders on the road where you could safely bicycle? And I've been trying to look for my copy of that Park and Rec plan, but in our conversations talking about looking at east and west, some sort of connections, the consultants took the town and tried to draw up what they thought might be workable projects. A lot of them right now are private property. So it's going to be, the trail's not necessarily ready to go. But it'd be interesting to see what this map looks like that's before us tonight, with some ideas of what the Parks and Rec had for a bike and trail system.
All right, Larry here. So Bruce, can you take a to-do to see if you can find that report that Bray just mentioned?
Yeah, I just put that down. I can reach out to Mark Berry tomorrow and try to get it. Maybe he has it digitally, or maybe he has paper, and I can try to get it out to everyone as soon as I get it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So given all the comments,
Anne has her hand up for a long time.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anne.
That's okay. Thanks, Michelle. This is Anne. So just, I think this is a really great framework to have our discussion. I apologize for the cats meowing. A really good framework to have discussions about the different properties and locations and the possible connections that we can make. But I agree with, I think it was Michelle and Larry, that you want in our final version, what actually goes into the report is probably what our recommendations are. And even taking out the deleted ones, I think sounds good. So I think this is fabulous as we look at properties and see how they line up with some of these dotted lines, and how realistic it is to make these connections will be really helpful.
All right, any other comments? All right, so Tom, given the discussion we've had, it sounds like everybody is in support. There's a difference of view of getting to a final product that is our recommendation, and taking out the, let's call it the yellow, I guess would be the yellow ones, leaving in our recommendations, and how we represent that. It's either the dotted lines, the blobs, or something, but I think we need to be consistent. Is that enough direction for you to continue?
Yes, we have enough. I could deal with this. I appreciate the input, and I'm just looking at, from our time perspective, it's 6:15 already. I had I just was looking from a big picture, make sure that everybody liked where this is all heading. It sounds like is for the other areas for 3.2. I didn't know this was probably the most controversial one. It's obviously 3.1. The 3.2 recommendations were pretty slim to some degree. I took a look at the floodplain areas. There's noted, a lot of things, areas were there. The report climate change identifying vulnerable things, and then the conservation endorses the work of the Town Resiliency Task Force. So I didn't really have any specific areas identified in 3.2 for procurements. And I didn't know if anybody had stuff from right now, other than potentially as you're working through them, then we'd have to roll those into this area. Moving on to,
Yeah, I know when we looked at those, there were hardly any.
yeah.
Yeah, there were hardly any parcels that didn't have a house or something on it. It's a tough area.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rocks. I mean, it's not like we have massive areas of marshlands.
Yeah.
So I'm personally okay with, I highlight it, identify it, and let's rely on the Resiliency Sustainability Task Force.
Yeah.
To get into a lot more specifics.
Yeah.
So I'm cool with that.
Okay. Then moving on to the 3.3, the natural waters and drinking water resources. We basically took a look at the different areas from the watersheds. And then what we did is we took a look at what Groton Utilities did in their, this reference in the POCD section 6 in regard to where they're seeing is with their future. And what they identified is that they, and I got this out of their studies, that a part of the Haley Brook watershed is the area that they have interest in, that we should be supporting them as they, they're already maintaining the Great Brook watershed here and their principal watershed areas today. But if they want to expand in the future, a lot of their stuff is obviously up in Preston and Ledyard. Our little bit is all in the northeast corner of Groton. Is all I did was reference them as far as from our recommendations, was just to support their future development.
All right, Larry here again. We took that into, when we went through the parcel, the list of yeses on the earlier one that Michelle showed,
Yeah.
we're very focused on, the waterways and what fed what. So I think we're in pretty good shape that they match up between what you just said and what the, let's call it I think it was what, 36 parcels that we had. So I think that's a pretty good match.
Yeah. Okay, and then when we went on to the priority number 4 was the preservation of woodlands and carbon sequestration. We talked a little bit about, the logic in regard to preservation of woodlands, looking at the EPA classification zones, what carbon sequestration does by trees. We did an estimate using the iTree program, which is recommended by the Audubon's, by the Arbor Day guys. We came up with, basically about 61% tree coverage in the overall for the town of Groton. We just put a pitch in here for the Tree City program and our tree advisory boards as we've had in the past. And then our recommendation was just to recognize that the overall forest canopy is in balance. Continue at our taskers as we've already given to the planning I put it relative to what the Groton Planning Department tree warden needs to maintain active programs. Then we put a recommendation in there regard to take a look at subdivision regulations update in regard to maintaining the native trees before and after installation of new subdivision. We've never really looked at that. If you take a look at in the current subdivision regulation, it says that you have to have one tree every 50 feet. And I'd say, wait a second, before you clear cut everything, we ought to be taking a look at how are you going to restore doing more than just one tree every 50 feet along the street. I think that's something that we could reasonably take a look at as a recommendation for investigation. It's not that it's mandated, but to help as far as for future clear cutting. And then likewise, is efforts to identification additional areas where forests can be better protected and for transition to public 490 protected open space. So those were the recommendations that came out of it. Nothing really specific because it's too general of an area. It's a justification, but I didn't see anything where we're trying to like put a forest into Groton. I think it's a little unrealistic with the situation we have today.
Yeah, I think recommendation number 2 is good, and it matches what we said in our last session about we're looking at the school property, how many trees were removed versus how many they're putting back. So that does match that, and I think that we should push for a little bit tighter control on that in terms of the clear cuts. It's cheaper for a developer to do clear cuts, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I didn't try to get into too much in definition of clear cutting and a whole compassing area. I did talk a little bit about that earlier in the text in regard to the Culverts program, where there are like GOSA up at their Candlewood Ridge area, they went and compassed 33 acres, which is essentially leave one tree standing in every acre. Okay, so it's just short of clear cutting, but that was all done with a grant to develop for natural habitat for the eastern cottontails and stuff. So that was a specific reason to get rid of forests, but now you have to balance that in the big picture in regard to the overall canopy and for carbon sequestration availability. So there's decisions, but I'm not going to try to get that into our open space acquisition grant or a plan here, but other than to acknowledge that that's a factor.
All right, fair.
Okay, going on to priority number 5 of the 7 here is the native flora and fauna. And this is where we got involved with the state of Connecticut Geological and Natural History Survey. Then that drives you into this natural diversity database areas, which is very specific for each town in Connecticut, where they identify the critical habitats areas. For us, it's all down here in the Baker Cove area and down at Bluff Point, and a little bit up here in the Gunjiwamp area, the green areas that we see in here. And then that they also identify the state federal list of species, these specific areas. So you get them along the brook up here that we were just talking about for that's already trying to be protected by the Groton utilities. We get some of our green belts along in here. I think this is where, the areas up in the Pequot Woods area. So there's a lot of good information on this to justify from a priority basis. This map, I was not really aware of it before, but we've incorporated all that into here. And it's just for a single recommendation in 3.5 was just to follow the identifications when you have those opportunities avail themselves for individual properties.
All right, super.
Okay, I think those all tie to the Greenbelt discussions that we had earlier. And then priority number 6 was the natural heritage resources. We talked a little bit more about the endangered species, which are already incorporated in here. The natural bedrock, we get some information in regard to that from a big picture. Take a look at again, going back to the natural history stuff. And this is where GOSA has been very successful in their sheep farm property. They use that as a good example as far as from an archaeological and then also with the Recreation and Heritage Trust Fund in regard to what DEEP is doing for their programs. And that was actually used up at the Candlewood Hill area. And then we came up with the recommendations again, supporting GOSA, their expansions, and then future applications for the Regional Natural Heritage Trust. So just using available funding through the state if when we as far as in that process, if we want to go pursue any of those grants.
All right, we got a couple of hand raises here. Ann, you want to go first? You're on mute.
That was a mistake, sorry.
Oh, all right, Michelle.
Yeah, this is just a really quick note back to that map. I recognize that Tom's working on adding, stuff, draw stuff to the map. once you guys have it, or we have it, or we want it, I can actually draw brand new lines in using the GIS mapping program. So you don't, you have to wonder how you're going to get that to look pretty. I can make it pretty with the GIS once we know what we want it to look like.
I don't, as far as from my perspective, as far as from the text perspective, if we want to get more details to this, I think what we should be doing is talking to the, if we need to know where these parcels would cross connect on any given space against the natural diversity database. I believe this is already available with the details that you can suck down from that website. So, as far as from display perspective from the plan here in section 3.5, I don't anticipate needing any more detail. I think this is adequate sufficiency of level of detail. But I think for our spreadsheet and stuff that we maintain as the Conservation Commission for evaluation purposes, I think having this data downloaded into your database would be appropriate.
I agree, Thomas and Michelle again, but I was talking about the way back in 3.1 again, because I've had my hand up since the end of 3.1.
Oh, okay.
So I was just pointing out that, you don't have to try to figure out how to make those greenways look what you want, because I can do that on GIS. But I can also try to include this stuff as well. So we'll definitely try. And I now that I'm thinking about this, having in that spreadsheet another column for is that parcel part of the national, the diversity database? Is it? So what other columns do you want to have information about the different parcels?
I think to some degree you want to have each of the 7 priorities listed in as a layer, essentially.
That's a great idea. Okay, that's going to be interesting to figure out, but that's a great idea. So you want each of the 7 priorities in the spreadsheet.
Right, as an individual, essentially an individual
columns,
layer.
yeah. That's perfect.
Some
Okay.
layers are that's because I tried to find a map that was applicable to each one of these sections. And the only one that I didn't, there's a couple that we didn't have one for the forest woodland carbon sequestration. I don't have a map. I haven't been able to find anything that makes a recommendation, but all the other ones that if I found anything, you've got a map.
Perfect. And this is Michelle again, really quick for the forest stuff, that original ground cover map, the layers has the tree layers in there. So we can use that as the tree cover, the forest cover.
Yep, that you got that in there. So I agree. Just take out and just leave that the forest layer. Yep. So I think we got, I think she has that for you, Tom.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Moving along then, we're at 3.6, and I think the last one was was 3.7 is our last item to talk about here, which is the outdoor recreation. I didn't put, again, the open space map already had everything in this. So I didn't try to replicate it in here. And I know that they're in the process of doing the Groton Parks and Recs master plan update, because they're at their 10-year do-over, and they're going to start the public hearings on, like, this is Wednesday or Thursday. And then I also noted that we've got, the city of Groton and the town along the Thames River with integral parts of the Thames River Heritage Park. I put that in there also. And then likewise, so it's just supporting their master plans. This goes back to the pedestrian and trail master plan. I did find this. I do have that, but I'm surprised I don't have the reference on that. But we do need to take. This is the one that Bray brought up earlier, because I've run across that one somehow. That's going. It made the text in here because I knew it existed. I'll have to try to find out where I've got it and maybe put a reference to that in here. I'll add that for 3.7.
All right, very good. Well, we've done about an hour and a half on the plan, which is good. So
that and item number 4 we had already discussed. You guys had already talked about that. So we're done with as far as for my 4 items on the agenda.
Right. Yep. All right. So good progress. I think the subcommittees should continue to meet and keep getting through here. I think the text committee has told me they're trying to get this done by June. So this is So, a couple more meetings, maybe we'll be there. All right, so I'd like to move along. I think the rest will go pretty quickly. The next item of business is the Arbor Day, Earth Day, Tree City event. Unfortunately, given the situation we're in, that has been canceled by the town.
I think Tom needs to stop sharing.
Oh, well. Right, so that's been canceled by the town. So hopefully next year we can get back to that. The next item is Trails Day, and I know Tom had sent out a note that says, is that going to happen? It's in June. I kind of think similarly that's pending on whether that's going to take place or not. So I would say we've got it kind of set up on what we want to do and where we're going to do it. But it may get canceled, and we'll have to follow the lead from the state of Connecticut, which kind of runs that, unfortunately. The next item, 4.4, is recommendations town council. This gets into one of the public comments. So there's 3 that we talked about: Oral School, Sealy, and the Noank property. And let me go to clean up my desktop a little bit and get rid of that stuff we've done. And what am I looking for? The first one was the Oral School. That's Grant, that's Sealy. And come on, let's get out of here. Get out of there. Get over there. You have to bear with me, guys, while I'm managing my desktop. What we agreed to do is last meeting was to track the Sealy School. So I'm sorry, the Oral School. But we did, let me share screen here. Where's my share screen? There it is. So based upon what happened last time, let's see, Sealy School property, Sealy School, let me share that. So I did, are you seeing that? So,
Yes.
So what the heck happened to it? Sealy School. There it is. There used to be a green shadow around it, and that seems to have disappeared. But I'm assuming you're seeing the Sealy School?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
You have
based
to move
upon
it.
our discussion at our last meeting, I put this together and have sent it in for as part of the comments. And it's basically that, that we support it, but.
Larry, could you just scoot it over to the left a little more? That's good. Okay, great. And then scroll there we go. Okay.
Okay. So I believe this reflects the discussion we had. I did run through the model, which I could kind of bring up. But the reason that the development works, which is really a conservation development part of the model under intelligent development that Tom mentioned in the plan, was that there was already an existing development there. And when you look at the land, there wasn't really anything there. I mean, there was no water, there's no marshes, and the stuff they were protecting as part of the plan turned out that says, this is a good deal for the town. I was trying to make the point that several of the town council members have from time to time accused us of never wanting to build anything. And that really isn't the case. We want to do intelligent development, is what we said. So, but as you see down here, we wanted to ensure that it does get legally permanently protected, and having the trails in there being open to the public, and it's part of the plan, and we're just going to have to manage and monitor that. So that was the Sealy property input. get rid of that. The Noank school input. No, give me a, where's my share screen at? Oh, let me stop share there and start share here and bring up the Noank input. So, what happened to the Noank input? I'll be darned. All right, somehow that seems to have oh, there it is. Noank Community Gardens. So why isn't that? Huh. Conservation objectives. That's the public meeting. Oh, there it is. All right. All right, so you should be seeing, now, as you recall, we did submit a memo back on June 3rd. And since that time, there were a couple of changes. So this is a draft, so I'd be looking for your approval on this. Is that they did change the assessed property value from 462K to 716,000. I did talk with the assessor's office. I guess I could debate with them the change in adding a 300K. I'm not sure it made that much of a difference, but I'll get to that in a second. But I said, all right, that's it. I didn't think I could win that argument. There was, I did get a preview of the input that was going to the town council, and they did add an option of affordable housing or senior housing in there. I did look at in the model the conservation development option. When you get through all that, the net from that perspective is that we didn't really, or that we shouldn't change our recommendation. That should be designated as open space because it was, and I'll get down to the dollar in a bit. That it's based upon the net of the economic benefit to the town. I didn't get into recommending the financial transaction. I know that was a public comment, but I thought that we are recommending a recommendation body, but it still be designated as a neighborhood park. And this was the net of the gain, that if we kept it as open space with long-term tax benefits, and now there's a debate on that, it was $32,000 a year to the town. Single family was $20,000. Affordable senior living complex was about $14,000. Conservation, because it's more, was 12 condos, about $28,000. So, we're not talking major differences, but open space still provided value to the town, and therefore why go forward and do it. This came up, again, is reiterating what we talked about, that were the other parts of the criteria that was above and beyond economics. And so as a total value, said that is to go with the fact recommendation that it be kept open space. Now, there was a lot more data in the June 9th one. I didn't want to replicate all that. That this was an update, and I think I said that in the beginning. So I will open it for comments and discussions, and then I'm going to ask for a vote in terms of submitting this formally to the town manager. So let me open it to those participants. There we go. So let me open it for discussions. Any comments? Oops, Ray?
Yes. I don't see any on the anything about this being turned over to Noank. I'm sorry, the entity of Noank, whatever that is.
The
Yeah,
executive board or whatever.
Yep, the executive committee, well, the Noank Fire District, to be
Yes,
technical.
Noank Fire District.
And the reason is that if it's protected, do we as a commission care whether it's owned by the Noank Fire District or owned by the town? As long as it's permanent open space, that was my opinion. That's why how I wrote it that way. But I again defer to comments from the rest of the commission members. So yes,
Just a follow-up to my comment. I agree with you. It doesn't, I don't have a strong opinion whether the town or the Noank Fire District has it. But if there is a groundswell on the council about looking at, again, putting houses in there, I think putting support behind the Noank Fire District rather than the town actually taking it over, drawing it away from the town and putting it over with the fire district, I think would be a stronger suggestion.
all right. Other comments? Tom, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, I look at it as a spectrum right now. Today, it's developable space that was a former school by the and the town's arguing over what should we do with it. By going to giving it to it, the next step is that you could take it away from the town discussion and make it part of the fire district, but then they now need to worry about who's going to maintain it, cut the grass, all this type of stuff. Whereas if you go and put a conservation, make this permanent with a conservation and recreation easement on it that the town invokes on itself, and it turns it over Parks and Recs, now the town owns it. The town will cut the grass. It'll be part of the process, just like all the other facilities that are in the town that they take care of. And so, you know, putting it on, and I think it should be, it's benefited by more than just the Noank Fire District. I think this should be a town function. And I agree with the recommendation for a permanent open space, but I think we need to be much stronger in how to go execute that. Leaving this, making we need to say you need to go put a open space and recreation easement in place would be a much more stronger recommendation than just with the words a permanent open space. I don't think the town people the town council recognizes this, and I don't think nothing against Mr. Bird, but I think he needs to get more educated as far as how you make something permanent open space. I know he got burned with this to some degree when he first walked into the office with the Boulder Heights and the Merritt property and the Kalinowski mess. But I still to this day I don't think he's really a fine tune, and we have a duty to him as his advisory board to be more specific in regard to.
Tom, to be more specific, good thought, as permanent open space, and now it's the mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So what do you want to suggest? The easement approach?
Yes. An open space and recreation easement.
If you have an easement on the property, you have to have another entity hold the easement. So there's a piece of property that the town owns up by Pequot Medical Center, 6 acres. And we've talked about somehow years ago of the town having an easement on it. And it came back to say is that you have to have a separate entity from the town to hold that easement. And the chances of the council looking at GOSA, Avalonia, or somebody else of holding that easement, it wasn't going to happen.
All right, so Ray, so if I extend that thought, it says they have a recreational easement held by the Noank Fire District?
That might be possible. That would be something the attorneys would have to take a look at.
This is Michelle. I would say potentially held by the Noank Fire District.
Hey, Larry, I would like to share with you, here's the conservation public recreation easement that they used on the Boulder Heights thing. I'm going to share this with you if I can do that.
All right, let me stop sharing. Go ahead.
Okay. Bring it up here. Let's see, how do I get the share? Oh my gosh. Oh, share screen, here it is. Okay. So this is you should be seeing the conservation and public recreation easement. This is the one that was developed by the state and signed off to. So now the town is the owner of the property, and we put an easement, the state put the easement on them, I guess. I guess this is more of a question to Bray. The town is the owner and they have an easement.
Yep, but it was state money that helped to purchase the Merritt property where the middle school is. And so they just simply took that whole bundle and moved it over to Boulder Heights. So in a sense, the state, still has their.
So it's a state easement, you're saying?
Pardon?
So you're saying it's a state easement that is on the Kalinowski property on Mechanic Road then?
Right. It's much like the state has an easement of sorts on the Merritt, the GOSA properties where they funded it. So it's the same sort of format.
Okay. So I guess
But
I would agree with then by taking what this easement and putting it on to give it to like it'd be very reasonable to ask for it to be on the fire district.
yeah, because if you did that, the town still owns it. You'd ask for Parks and Rec to still maintain it, mow the grass. But the overseer about keeping it as open space would fall back on the Noank Fire District.
Can I just say, when you have a state conservation easement, I think there's some definition about probably what that means versus the fire district, where that could mean we're going to mow the whole thing and have like casual soccer games there. Whereas a state conservation easement might mean something in terms of we're going to let, some natural trees and some natural, like real open space be there. So I'm just a little curious about what the difference would be. Who holds that easement?
Well, it's what you write in the easement.
Mm.
So that easement has to be decided on by both parties.
Okay.
Yeah. So Avalonia has some easements in Groton, and I sat in on one of those as we were drawing it up. So it's the owners that I'm giving the easement to the Avalonia, but I still own the property. And here's the following things I would like to do with the property in the future. And knowing that Avalonia is going to be responsible for the carrying out of the whatever the easement says.
And guys, I didn't want to get to that level of specificity. I think we got to get through this in stages. First is to get it off the table, to sell it. And then next is do it. So I've made the adjustments as recommended by Tom. I'd be looking for a motion to submit this. And I guess we can do more adjustments under the discussion phase of a motion. So.
I'll move that we accept the draft for forwarding to the town manager as proposed by Larry for the Noank School open space area.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great, got it.
All right, discussion. Any modifications or changes? All right, so Bruce, formally, you have to now call a roll for the vote.
Yeah, sure. So everyone in favor of Tom's motion, if they could digitally raise their hand, please.
I can't digitally raise my hand.
You have to open the box, Kristen.
I know you tell me that, but there is no box.
Called participants. There's the little black
At
line.
the bottom of the screen, There should be a
Right.
participant's picture.
Okay,
You put
it's
your
raised.
finger on that and click on it.
it's raised. Done. Thank
Okay,
you.
so I'm seeing Larry Dunn's hand raised, Tom Olson's hand raised, Michelle Fitzpatrick's hand raised, Bray Rafferty's hand raised, Ann Schmidt's hand raised, and Kristen's hand raised. So the motion passes unanimously 6-0.
All right, so I will, what I will do is, let me save that. I will send it to you, Bruce, so that you can forward it formally to John.
Okay.
All right, so I'll take that action. Send to Bruce. Okie dokie. All right, so that is the formal recommendations, town council. The next item, let's see if I can zip through this. Oh, that was actually no wank. All right, so we kind of covered that one. And this Sealy School, we covered that. So 2020, we did, let me just go to that. We did do quite a few of that. And I'm just going to zip through it. I don't think there's a lot of ads on that. Objectives, share that. So if I look at this, there's the green. We did the first one. So the only one of the differences is there any updates in terms of participation of the municipalities? This was another one that was raised during the public session. And in fact, the answer was yes, we have reached out to the city. Is there any update, Michelle, in terms of the,
Nope, haven't done anything.
all right.
Tom was gonna try to go to the city. Have you had a chance to do that,
Yes,
Tom?
and I did go to the city meeting and I gave them the same explanation I gave to the Groton Long Point folks. I presented, after sitting through an hour and a half of inland wetlands discussion, they welcomed me and said, thank you for coming. I explained that we would try to get them something to look at by the 1st of June, as far as from a text perspective. Said that we'll acknowledge stuff we recognize the city has their own plan and everything, but that we're trying to incorporate everything together for the town. They were very appreciative of it. It says, you're really the first person that's come and talked to us about any kind of conservation thing in years. And because we do 99% of our stuff is inland wetlands. They freely admitted to that. They logged my name and they logged your name down because I gave them your name as the representative from the city. And then they said, we will, if you send something to us to look at, we will look at it and make a comment and give you something back. Okay, as they do with anything else, with any kind of inland wetland application or whatever. So they're looking for something to be formally sent to them with a letter head on it that says, here's the, please review this as a draft for comments and any comments and incorporation. And they said,
right.
we'll rather look at it and get it back to us.
Good. Groton Long Point. Any update from the last time?
The only thing is I did send an invitation for this meeting to let them know along with, I told them where they can see because I had promised them when I saw them back in January that we would have stuff to go together. And I did get a response back from them. They said, yes, we were able to get to the website. We see your plan and we'll take a look at it. I got that by email from Mr. Mark White, who's my liaison point of contact on the conservation. He's not the chairperson, but he's the point contact that I have with them.
Well, we can only lead them to water, I suppose.
Right. But I said, I think once we get down to, I think the next, by our May meeting, I think we'll be in a position to send this thing out for formal comments. And I think we're getting very close to where we need to be to, with agreement from everybody that this thing is going to be ready for prime time for official comments. But I think if we put it at the next, I anticipate at the May meeting, I'm going to be putting a motion out to send this thing out for comments to the various organizations as well as the municipalities.
All right. On conservation groups, the Groton Conservation Advocates, Christine, that was yours.
She's muted.
You're muted. Unmute you, or Bruce, unmute her.
I think she needs to do it herself.
Okay, so, yeah, I think they're present and represented in this meeting. They had some questions and concerns about the draft of the plan, and I guess we can ask them afterwards whether they felt that those were adequately addressed in the work that we've done. They're here, we could ask them. I think they're pretty happy with what's going on, with what we're doing. But as I said, Eugenia and Liz, I think, are both on this call. So if you wanted to ask them what they thought, that'd be fine.
All right, I'm willing to open that up, given we're at that section. So I think I only see Eugenia left. I think Liz is gone.
I think Mr. Furlong is still on with them also. He's still here.
Any comments, Eugenia? She went for supper. There she is.
No, I've been here all along. Yeah, well, we actually sent a message to Tom this morning asking if any of the recommendations that we came up with and sent to the Conservation Commission on the 10th of March had been distributed to everyone. Had they really been taken account of for this draft? And we didn't hear back from Tom, so maybe Tom can answer now.
I'm available to answer right now. I can, what you're doing is that we did get your 3-page memo from the 9th of March. I'm able to share it if Larry unshares, but there was a number of comments based on an earlier draft. This has been from the March draft, which as we went through the development there, I was able to, some of the stuff I took into account. It's not like we just dismissed it, but we've gone kind of jumped over, in a lot of areas where we came in and did a lot more, particularly in sections 2 and 3 of the report. And so that's like you made the comments down here about that you felt that the document is somewhat lengthy. The executive summary, we still haven't developed that at all. And we things that we did take into consideration, but to some degree, I can't say I can show you for one in regard to what we did, how I'm going to answer each one of your questions. I did not try to do that. So I can say that we, as a committee, this was shared with Kristen and Ann and myself as the text people. In regard to, we tried to be more broader in our open space definitions. We went from just the zoning to include everything that we could. As you go through the green belts, we've kind of done a lot, things differently than what you were looking for, I think, in regard to how we describe things in section 2, and then actually put proposals together in section 3. Likewise for wetlands and each one of your areas that you had internal contradictions and all this kind of stuff. I think we tried to clean a lot of that up, but I would strongly encourage you to take a look at what we put together here today on this version. And I think I've tried to answer your questions, but it was more it had it as a background rather than trying to say, yes, this is, what our, how we, I can tell you for a point by point basis. I did not try to do that. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and we appreciate that. And from what I heard from your discussion of the open space draft, is that you're going to be coming out with a more final draft in the near future or sometime between now and June, and that you're going to be sending it to various organizations.
Right.
And I think maybe at that point, we can come back with more observations or recommendations, because I think when we sent that document out to you on the 10th, maybe it was a little bit too early, because you're still obviously developing your plan. And so I think that's probably what we should do going forward, is when you have I'm not sure if we're talking about a final draft or.
I would say what I envision right now is I've got comments from today's meeting. Where the text committee will re-review. We now have a better understanding what the parcel people are doing, and that we will at a month from today, when we meet for that, I think we're going to have a very clean document that's going to be out. That is my recommendation at that point, is to then send that to the GOSA, the GCA, to Avalonia, to the city, to Long Point, and anybody else that we want to add to that list that we feel is a stakeholder in regard to the open space plan, that we're going to and then give you a formal point by point why we didn't incorporate anything that you'd want at that point.
Okay.
I agree with you totally that it was a little premature.
We also need a chance to read the entire document.
Yeah.
I was able to get through like 25 pages today. I'm not sure what Liz and Jim were able to get through in preparation for the meeting, but it's been really interesting hearing the discussion. I think we would clearly have some responses to some of the things that we heard today. But overall, it seems as though you've made a lot of progress toward the final document. And
We're getting there.
yeah.
All right.
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear
Thank
me?
you very much.
Yep, we can hear you, Jim.
I'm very impressed by what's all the what I've heard here. What bothers me a little bit is I'm hearing the term open space so much. Open space traditionally, I think here, has meant passive, permanently protected natural areas. For example, that's what Groton Open Space Association stands for. Now, when you get into the airport and you talk about that as open space, I just wonder if we ought to have, and I think Tom may have mentioned this, ought to have some special term for what open space has meant to conservationists in Groton, people like the Groton Open Space Association. I think that they, despite what Joan said, I think most people who belong to the Groton Open Space Association would not see the airport as, open space. It's just a thought. A couple of other points. I felt that when you first started talking about the two types of, maybe ending here, green recreation and green conservation, I felt that you ought to define a little more quickly what those are. I'm sure you do it later on, but it could have been done right there so they don't get blended and actual conservation doesn't get blended with baseball. The other point was the greatest good or for the greatest number. That wasn't totally the words used, but that comes early in the report, and I think that it sort of rings wrong. I think greatest good for greatest number suggests a leveling out of things, which you didn't intend, and which I think is something we shouldn't have. We should have a diversity, geographical and natural diversity, but not the greatest good for the greatest number. because who knows what that means. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think, Tom, I think you're addressing most of those things. I don't want to reiterate the hour and a half we spent. But other than the last point, Jim, I think the rest of them, I thought that were being addressed.
Could I interject one more thing? There was a strong recommendation from GCA that we have a professional editor go over this document, but I didn't know that was actually possible. So that just came out from the
Yes,
group.
that means spending money, which we don't have, you know.
I don't think we have any. I don't think there's the money for that. But
I
they
gave
also said that we
kudos
have.
I gave kudos to Tom because getting the references in and et cetera, I thought that was a major step forward in what I would call professional scripting.
Yeah, and once we do a really good executive summary in the front, then people won't have to wade through the whole thing unless they really, really want to. But I like, they also suggested kind of shortening it and eliminating stuff. But I thought that having all this extensive research easily accessible, especially since it's an online document, was valuable. And we can have, again, the executive summary in the beginning, people can wade through it, but we've done so much work and it's good to have all that documented and recorded for, anybody else to use in the future, so.
All right, good points. Moving back to the, I guess this was just wrapping up. So the other one we had, it wasn't technically on the agenda, but it's in the 2020 objectives, is on plastics. I think we're kind of in a holding pattern there.
Okay, I can update on the plastics just a little
Yep.
briefly. We're working on a little logo. I think we all discussed last time. I have a really good graphic designer working on it, but she's taken a pause right now because she says nobody's going to the stores anyway right now, so nobody really needs a sticker right now. And she's busy making masks for the first responders, so she's not working on the logo right now. That's point A. And point B is there's been a little communication back and forth. Ozzy Osman from the RTM reached out to me, and I believe maybe also GCA was either reached out to or also contributed to this idea that people are throwing people are using gloves and sanitary wipes and stuff at the grocery store, and then they're just walking outside and just throwing them on the ground. And it's a problem. So I brought it to the attention of the mayor and the town council. She referred me to already the police have come out with some kind of a statement, just encouraging people to dispose of these things properly. So that's been, it's coming out of town. I put it on the GCA Facebook page, but so just so you guys are kind of in the loop on it, that as far as the plastic waste, and there's also a lot of fight right now against supporting plastic bag bans. Everyone now wants to roll them out forward. So that's the plastic stuff.
All right, thank you. I think I'm just going through and I think we're pretty much there. We have the 2021 budget discussions, and there was an item in the agenda that was provided by Tom. And I think I also have that. Let me go back to share screen. I think I have Tom's memo here. There it is. Oops, where'd it go?
It's there. I see it.
Okay, oh, it just, on my screen though, it kind of like, there we go. Now we got it. Now I can see it. All right, so Tom, you've.
Yeah, the only, just as I did last year, I went through the entire budget once it got posted. The issue last year we had in regard to the Boulder Heights and Kalinowski stealing the $63,000, that is all gone away. The money, from what I understand, is not being used. Parks and Rec people have backed off. And so when what was submitted was, as we expected, a $25,000 per year CIP. Because there was no required action this year, I kind of in FY year ending 2021, there was no action, so they didn't have to vote on this through the town council. It's just they know about it. I did talk to, I did at the public hearing for the town council, I did represent us as a, myself in the public input saying, hey, we're working, this requires to have a plan. The Conservation Commission is working the plan. And then I do, and we will have it out in the future too. And if town council is interested in it, we can make that available. But it is being posted on our website at the town website as part of our meeting agenda. So that we are working on this. So we will have a plan on how to spend that $25,000 per year that you're going to start putting into the fund for the next fiscal year. What worries me a little bit, the CIPs were kind of cut pretty heavily this year because of the response, because of the potential for decreased tax bases coming in, and with the unknown issues from the town from the COVID-19 impacts is still not determined. So the town cut the CIPs pretty heavily, and this would be something I would suspect next year would be cut if we're faced with a similar situation. So I just kind of let people know about it. But for right now, our fund balance is up from $64,000 last year up to $73,000. You can see in the last line of the CIP in the discussion there as of 30 June. So that's a good news story. And so we do essentially next year, you'd have $100,000 essentially to play with as far as for doing surveys and going out and applying for an OSWA grant or whatever. But it's just something I think we need to start taking a look at what's our next level of detail. That do we want to put something like that into the plan? Because I haven't done it right now, but it's something as far as from a text committee, I think we need to think about it and potentially go forward to expand it in our recommendation areas in chapter 6 of the plan in regard to how we're going to go spend this money. And I did add these words into the plan, but and so as far as for on a way forward, I think we need a little bit more detail, and I think that we'll take a look at it as a test committee over the next month here in regard to what again, working with the parcel commission subcommittee in regard to what their recommendations are. But I think we're getting there, and I think we're going to have a fairly decent plan in regard to what to be working forward. So that's all I've got.
All right, thank you. Bray, you had some comments on the trails funding?
The Parks and Rec Department director, we were having a one-to-one conversation, and he mentioned that he had put in for monies to do a connection between Haley Farm and Bluff Point. So the bikeway comes out of Haley Farm down, I think, Lily Lane, and he was in particular that brings you into the Midway Oval neighborhood. There is a cutoff that can go through the woods onto Industrial Drive, if you call it. That's the road that runs off of Depot Road along the airport, the railroad's working buildings. And it makes a much better loop connection to Bluff Point. So if you want to bike from one to the other, and that they have the consultant has drawn up a plan and costs to develop this connector, but because there wasn't much backing for it, the Parks and Rec director feels that it was dropped from the budget. So I think in lieu of what Tom just said, because we don't know how much money is coming in because of this whole virus effect, what I'd like to do is to see, I guess coming up on Thursday, there's a meeting about Parks and Rec looking at some of the inputs from the public of what direction they should go in. I think what I need to do is to find out from the Parks and Rec director, can you give us maybe 2 or 3 projects? The other project that has not been funded also is the Tri-Town Bridge behind the Cutler Middle School that goes across the little water course that's there to connect BB Woods up with the rest of the Tri-Town Trail. That has been on the wetlands have approved it, the bridge, the plans have been drawn up for the bridge. The funding just hasn't been there because I don't think it's just Parks and Rec Director puts out his budget. And then I think also in the budget down at the bottom are these other little projects. And I think when they look at it, if there's not much support from anywhere else, they get cut. So that's where that is. And so it looks like right now, the best we can do is to maybe help formulate something for next year, working with Parks and Rec to see what we can do to continue these linkages between open space within the town.
All right, on a kind of a follow-up to that, I did kind of have an email exchange with Parks and Recs about one of the impacts or effects of the virus is that there are more people using open space. I know they do have state police monitoring and keeping down the population in Bluff Point, for example. They're kind of metering in people and only letting so many because there's just, filling up the parking lots. I noticed even at Haley Farm, there's, well, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times the number of people that I'm used to seeing there. And my point was is that, from terms of maintenance and support, it's well, good news, bad news. Open space is now providing a benefit that none of us even thought about. I didn't think about it, a number of months ago. What should we do in terms of, keeping the trails open and safe and monitoring it? So they said they're looking at it. I didn't get anything specific back. But I guess my question to you guys is, are you seeing similar higher activities, in the ones you more frequently visit than before?
I can comment on BB Woods and Pequot Woods and say, yes, the few times I've taken recent walks on both those properties, there's been an upswing on the number of people. One day last week, I drove on Sandy Hollow Road where the parking area for Pequot Woods is located, and people were parked out in the road. There were over 14 cars on this middle of the day, which is just unheard of.
Yeah, I agree.
So yes, there's been appears to be a big upswing, and the same thing I think probably holds true for cop property.
And I can tell you I spend a lot of time on the GOSA properties, both the Sheep Farm, Candlewood Ridge. We're actually doing big work parties at both locations. And we've got a constant flow of people, 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're actually even going on to the Sheep Farm South area. There was, 7 cars lined up there yesterday morning at 10 o'clock. People actually going on that property, even though it's not, GOSA doesn't even own it yet. There's people already utilizing it.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'm thinking about it. Is that we have nothing. We have nothing in there in our document about maintaining people's sanity in times like this as a benefit of open space. But I mean, it's real. It's. I don't know. I mean, as an after action report, certainly, we should make note of it. And we got no way, other than anecdotals, we don't really have a formal way of measuring, the use of it. So I think if we all just kind of keep our eyes open and we could kind of pull this up and see what we want to make of this as we get through the next summer. The weather is now getting nicer, and I expect that it's going to continue to increase. And, I'm thinking that, is there, I know recommendations about how to meet people when you're on the trails. I know I get off the trail, to maintain the distance and let people go back, and we, kind of wave and talk from a distance. Um, So I don't know if there's, some suggestions or et cetera that we should be providing on, trail etiquette in this time. I'm trying to think of that. Maybe I'll take that as a to-do. And I think that's kind of trail etiquette in the world of, in terms of the virus world.
Could I ask Larry, are you suggesting, because I think it really points out how incredibly important this space is. When everybody decides they need it and want it, I wonder if that's something we address in our document, that just maybe a little addendum or a little paragraph somewhere, just kind of anecdotally. Is that what you're suggesting we include it?
Well, I've suggested that the text committee think about that.
It's a good idea.
Is never let a crisis go.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of, this is Michelle. It's one of the reasons I have my hand up, is because traditionally one of the benefits of open space that we did is the health benefits. And I know back when I was, actively participating in Avalonia, when I was the president, we were looking at ways of publicizing or saying, here's why you should care about open space. And one of the reasons is the whole health benefit. So we could have a little section, why should we have open space? Well, one of the reasons is the health benefits.
You mean physical and psychological health?
Yeah.
Yes,
Hey,
absolutely.
Christine, you've got contacts with the press, right?
Who?
You, yeah.
Who? Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should I call Kimberly and maybe that's an article idea?
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
I think that just what you said is we can get a twofer. I mean, one is the publication and the benefit.
Yep.
The other one is trail etiquette, I think is an important part of this whole thing. Bikers still haven't got that figured out yet. I think they're but that's another, the hikers I think are okay. The bikers kind of leave me a little pause as they come barreling through. They don't seem to have changed their attitude. But there is a good public interest with that, and especially entering into the season might be there. So I think that's
I'll talk to her. It's a good story idea, and she'll probably do her research, and we can just plant a seed for an idea like that. Great idea.
Yep. All right. Good. I think
Tom has his hand up.
Tom.
Yeah. Right. And the reason I raised my hand was that there was an article about 10 days ago in the New London Day in regard to 5 places that are off the side in the local area here to go hiking, to basically address just what you were talking about. And the Candlewood Ridge was one of the 5 and we've actually asked people of, because I've been up there working every day, doing some clearing and stuff. And people have been responding to that, but there wasn't anything of regard very much in that article on trail etiquette. So you may, if you're going to go talk to the New London Day or whoever, you may want to reference back to that article already and just for better explanation and expanding on it. And
you don't know anything do you know who wrote that?
Well, I can pull up the in the New London Day I'll see if I can come up with
it. But I did read it, but it was more of, oh, here's some places to go. It really didn't holistically looked at the benefit. I mean, like we just talked about, the benefits of open space and then how you actually use it during this time period. I think those are things that were not in that article.
I agree.
Yep. All right, good. All right, that's a good stuff. I think the other item, Bruce, you had community rec needs as an upcoming meeting on the 9th.
Oh, the survey that I emailed out.
Let me look at what it was. Yeah, you sent me a note.
Yeah, let me get that up too. But I sent it to everyone.
Oh, you sent it to everyone? Okay. I'm just wondering, did you want to make a comment on that? I guess that's more of.
Yeah, I can. Let me get it up just to see what it is, but. Was that yesterday or Friday? I sent it to you.
I got it. I can find it too. You sent it to me the 3rd. All right, I'll bring it. I can share the screen. I just found it. Share screen. Reminder. There it is. So I just brought it up.
Okay, yeah. So all this is it was a community recreation needs assessment. They're having a virtual meeting on April 9th. They're also taking some comments there in the Facebook link, and they really just want to know, some public input regarding to Parks and Recreation. And, being the Conservation Commission, I thought you guys might be interested in it. So if anyone wants to attend, it's on April 9th.
Or at least send comments.
Or you can send comments, yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you. Anything else from a report of staff?
No, I don't have anything. I know I told most of you, if not all of you, that the town manager was, deciding whether or not he was going to have non-essential boards meet or not. And it seems like he's going to allow it for now. Obviously, we're meeting tonight, but I haven't heard any other talk about that. So I think we're going to be able to continue on as normal. Well, I mean, virtually, but as normal. And we're not going to be directed not to meet anymore. But obviously, if there's another decision on that, I'll let you know.
All right. I'd just like, Tom, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and the reason is just going back over all the list of things, I kind of missed thing is what is on oral school. You mentioned it earlier in regard to the 3 recommendations to town council. Talk about no ink sealing, but we didn't talk about the oral school. I just didn't, what you were doing with that one.
They're moving forward with that. And if you look at the plans for it, it's very similar to, kind of a conservation development approach where I think it's, when I calculate, it's about 40% of the property is being reserved. The thing is, it's so early that we just need to track it. And basically it's a continuation from our discussion last month that said we were interested in tracking it. So I think we'll do what we did. It's on the right path as long as they do what they say they're going to do. It actually looks.
What concerns me is, I grant you that the 50% of the 77 acres or whatever is supposed to be put into open space. But again, it goes back to what level of open space should we be, as a commission here, being more proactive and making a formal inquiry to the state DEP, who's the current landowner. Are they going to be putting an easement onto the developer or onto the town in regard to formally protecting this? And should we be instigating that as a commission? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, or do we ask the town to do that formally? I mean, we're an advisory.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should be going up, maybe for next month, I'd be recommending that we put a memo out to the town manager to say, so that he can get, a legal decision in regard to that we get an open space and recreation easement getting generated by the state for that property in parallel with the development that's ongoing here, so that we have a clear understanding in regard to protection of that area.
Can I interject here?
Absolutely.
I think that DEP has formally put its footprint on that property to protect it. I'm not sure where the line is, but there was a effort by one of our local representatives who put a bill in a few years ago to do away with that open space and make it as one large property to be developed all available for the developer. That did not go very far in the legislature a couple of years ago. So I think that DEP has got their footprint in there. It's been tested a few times by some people asking, some representatives or council members or something like that. We just need to see what that formal setup is, that DEP is actually taken over that property, see what what their deed or whatever the arrangement is already made. And I believe that if they give it to the town, just like other properties, the DEP has helped to formulate and are the representatives of the protection of, or have an overseeing voice in that property. So I would say that we need to take a look at what that arrangement is, that agreement is first. And then find out then what will happen in the future when the town takes it over, because I'm assuming that, I don't know that the town wants to rent the property that they're developing. I'm assuming at some point they're going to turn it over to a developer.
Yeah, that was my understanding. Bruce, could you just check to see if there's a formal deep town agreement on the oral property?
A town agreement? Yes, I can.
Yeah, it should be between the two, and then we can go from there. I thought when I looked at it that they were working on one, and it did have some protections, et cetera. At least the directionally they were wanting to do the protections. But I think Bray makes a good point, is that if it ain't in writing, it's not necessarily there. It may still be early, I don't know. So if there's nothing there, that leads us down one path. If there's something there, we can review it. And see
I mean, my understanding of it is that the open space that's going to be deeded to the town, or deeded to the state, excuse me, has already been done. And that line has already been created. There's a map of it, and it's been formalized for quite some time now.
Okay.
I know it exists, that map, and I know the deed exists, but so I'll try to get that over to everyone to look at, because.
Well, if you get that, then we can actually add it to our map.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I'll try to find that. I know the map exists. I'm not sure about the cross easements yet, but I'll look into it.
All right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, oral school map. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
I
Aye.
think I heard unanimous. Any opposed? All right, no abstentions?
Okay, I see 6
All right.
hands to approve. Okay.